Okay, so today we're going to be talking about Marx's view of historical societies. Um, so, all historical societies, according to Marx, are a conflict between the different classes of a given society. So, his quote is that the history of all hitherto existing societies is a history of class struggles. So, what we have is we have an empowered class and we have a subordinate class, and these two groups are constantly in tension with one another, right? And it's because uh, 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 rights and burdens are inadequately distributed across these two groups, such that one is socially lesser than another. And so that creates radical tension, right? So Marx talks about the slave society. This is the conflict here is between free citizen, right, with various voting rights, with land rights. This is what we get in the ancient Greeks, and the slave, and where the slave is someone who does not hold any rights like that. And who can't vote, doesn't have the power to vote. We might also extend, look beyond the economic sphere. So maybe like women too. Maybe there's conflict between um, the women in a given society, given that they can't vote, given that they don't have quite as many privileges as like landowning males, right? And so there's tension and there's conflict. But Marx is pointing out that there is conflict between whoever a free citizen is, right, with powers and voting rights, and the slave. Similarly, in the medieval feudal societies, right? So a feudalism is an economic structure in which a lord owns quite a lot of land, right? And what the lord will do is he will delegate some of that land where peasants or serfs can live, right? And the peasants or serfs, they will work the land for the lord, right? And they are given a portion of the crop, and then some of the crop goes up to the Lord, right? So there's this kind of hierarchy. And according to Marx, there's an inadequate distribution of ownership here, where the means of production are primarily owned by the Lord, but and the serf is forced to use those means of production in order to serve the Lord, or in order to like provide for the Lord, right? So not quite a slave, right? Not quite as bad as slavery, but still we have unequal distribution of rights and ownerships, such that conflict follows, right? So what we get from work going from a slave society to a feudal society, right? We sort of christenize such that like there are fewer slaves that are held, right, in Europe, especially in England. And then we develop a substitute, a better substitute, which is feudalism, right? Still not like the best, right? But it is getting better. Eventually, we end up where Marx is, in the capitalist society, where the conflict is between the capitalists, where those folks own the means of production, where the means of production are understood as things like various factory machines, cotton gins, all of these sorts of things, right? That sort of around the Industrial Revolution, and the proletariat. And the proletariat is the working, non-owning class, right? The wage slaves, as he calls them in other parts of the of different texts. So there's a conflict between the capitalist and the proletariat. And this is different from the economic situation in the slave society and in the feudal society, because the proletariat can maybe own stuff, right? They can maybe own a house. They can maybe buy some stuff, right? Whereas it's not quite as clear that even that level of participation is found in these previous societies, maybe in the feudal society. Um, so but interestingly enough, there is still conflict because the means of production are concentrated on a few number of capitalists, and there are like all of these workers, right? And so um, in all of these societies, we have labor that is not quite right. So we'll look at a different video for this point specifically, but it's helpful to talk about it now. So like, what's the big deal, right? Why is it like not? Why is it such a big deal not to own the means of production? Well, it's a big deal not to own the means of production because labor is so important. And by that, Marx means that we need to take integrity in our work, right? When you work on something, you put a little bit of yourself into that product, into the thing that you're working on, right? So suppose I chop down a tree and make a canoe. Marx wants to say like you're dumping a little piece of yourself into your labor there. Your labor makes you who you are. It's what you do for like 10 to 12 hours a day, right? So you need to take pride in your work. And you can kind of see some of Locke's property theory cropping up here in the term that you're kind of mixing your labor with the thing makes that thing yours. Those ideas would have been available to Marx. But when you don't own the means of production, right, and you're just like working on a factory line doing the same thing over and over, you're not able to like sort of have the connection through the whole process with a given product. So Adam Smith, he talks about it's more effective to have 10 guys doing one step of the process rather than having one guy doing a 10-step process, right? So if we need to make, say, shoes, and making shoes, turning leather into shoes is a 10-step process, it's more efficient to have 10 guys doing a little bit of the process, one step of the way. Whereas it's less efficient for one person to do all of them and just have 10 guys doing the whole process over and over. So, um, but doing the process where you sort of take a raw material to turn it into a product is actually very rewarding, according to Marx. And so when you take that away from the worker, that alienates the worker from what he's working on and sort of shatters his or her identity. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next video, and then we'll talk about how we get to communism in the video after that. Thanks.